So hello, bootstrappers.
Hello, bootstrappers.
Hi, bootstrappers.
So Hitesh and I go way, way back. Heck, it's over 10 years now, I would say. We did VChatter together and plus a whole lot of other things. He's thrown work my way. We've done startups together, just about everything you can imagine. It's been a long road, huh? So you've been kind of watching us do all these videos and you called me up and said, hey, I'd love to know kind of what your workflow is.
Yeah, I wanted to understand, number one, how you decide what topic to focus on, then how do you come up with who you are inviting, and then what discussions you have, and then also, the back end of it. What tools do you use? What works, what doesn't work? It'll be nice to learn all of that.
The first thing, and you kind of know this from doing previous startups, you have to pick an audience. And Eva kind of walked through what you were thinking there as we narrowed it down.
First thing is like, who is this really for? Because if the piece of blank paper is, the size of the world, it doesn't help. But if the piece of paper, is at least the size of a poster board, well, then there's some boundaries, and that's good. And so focusing on where our experience is around people who bootstrap, at least some big chunk of their business building is around bootstrapping, whether it's necessity or desire, made sense to us. Then thinking about what would be valuable for them, and that's when Will and I sat down, and Will was the driver on this around like what are the three areas that would be important as somebody bootstrapping a business: design, build, sell. There's definitely subcategories under that. But Will, do you remember kind of the distillation process there?
Well, that came out of the GrowthX work, that we were doing, where we were trying to say, what a startups are missing. Now, GrowthX focused on sell. And, we said, all right, we're going to assume people can build something and they can design it, but where they really need help is selling. But as you look at the three pieces, they all come into play. That's one of the things I love about Hitesh is he's an engineer with a very good design aesthetic. And he's also not afraid to sell stuff. Does that resonate with you, Hitesh, around the three skills?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to summarize the three things that we focus on, right? And you're right. When we were working on GrowthX together, that build piece was, something we felt was missing. And all of these pieces, in a way, these are like three parallel swimming lanes, right? It's not like now you've built it, now you need to figure out, how you sell it, or now you've designed it, now you need to figure out how to. It all goes together, right? It all flows together. As I was thinking about how to build all of these different skills and how to build these businesses, and Will, you were a big influence and a motivation behind, a lot of things that I ended up learning and how I ended up learning those. And I remember we had this discussion around, there's this sort of, we talk about full stack builder, like who can build up and down the stack. Like you
Right.
can talk about Kubernetes and containers and even under that, the storage and the network and compute. And on top of it, you can talk about all of the application stacks and from Python to Java to Node to, all of those. And there too, like backend and front end and then JavaScript and React and, all of these things we worked on together. So we were talking about if we are logged in a room as we were, in Palo Alto those days, can we build the whole thing, just the two of us? And do we have everything which is required to build a product? But then I started thinking about it's not just, can we build it locked up in that room, but can I, when I am locked up in a room with maybe somebody like you, Will, can I also design it and sell it? And that's the full stack founder, right? So from full stack builder to full stack founder is a journey also.
So the worst part in that particular startup, which was VChatter, was the only way to, quote, do it at that time was Adobe's, what was the name of it?
Oh, ActionScript.
ActionScript. And I remember getting the ActionScript book, and it was one of the thicker books I've ever seen in my life. But we found a starter program that Adobe had actually built that sort of did the problem, and that was kind of our foundation, and we built out from there. And one of the things that Hitesh and I are fearless about is putting things out that aren't finished. So, our first product had 3 buttons, only one of which actually worked. But we measured how many times people clicked the other 2 buttons.
I was so afraid of pushing deploy on that. Remember, we were pushing it to either Google App Engine or, which was the earlier version of Python,
Yep.
Google App Engine. And I was like, what if, people look at this and they don't come back? And Bill said there are, at that time, what was it, 6 billion? There are 6 billion of them.
People.
Don't worry.
Well,
these few hundred, they will come back.
Dave and I had a saying, and I think Eva probably heard it, which is, don't worry about it. You can't make all 6 billion people angry at one time. we would just push stuff out. Now, we wouldn't push it out to the whole user base, because we were bigger at one time. But like when you're starting out, your user base is nothing. I think everyone's afraid the New York Times is going to run an article about them the next day about how crappy their app is, and nobody cares. Like nobody's looking at you.
That's the facts of life.
Yes.
Well, I think that you coached me, Hitesh. I wonder how many founders you've given that piece of advice to.
A lot who don't listen, but yeah, I've given it to some people that take it and run with it. But you can see them kind of freeze up internally. It's like, well, it's not ready yet. It's not good enough yet. I don't want the world to see it. And the problem is that the real issue is nobody's going to look anyway. Like you're lucky if 100 people look at your product or 1,000 people look at your product. Now, Hitesh and I had studied kind of the viral loops of Facebook, and that was the thesis around VChatter. So we actually built the product with those loops in, and it grew it's one of the few things I've ever done that grew that quickly, which created its own problems. But from the very beginning, we were intentional about let's make this thing spread easily from friend to friend because it's a communication product and you need your friend to have it to be able to talk to them. So we had all these loops built in and it went really well.
One of the things I hear that I think bootstrappers, I don't know if they're hearing or not, but you ought to be hearing this, is that you had a learning framework around it when you launched it. You're like, we're launching it half-ass, but we're launching it with a solid intention to learn X.
Well, and it wasn't just data. I mean, Hitesh, how much time did you spend talking to our actual users? I mean, you put a ton of effort into it.
Yeah. I think it's Paul Graham who said, go slow to go fast, which is initially do things that don't scale. Initially, our goal was to talk to everybody who touches WeChatter. And at that time, it was possible because the identity with Facebook, and we could reach out and say, hey, I'd love to learn what you think about it. How did you reach here? What did you do? And, all of those things with every user. And you are right. A lot of bootstrappers, they push things out, but then there's no way to close the feedback loop. It's broken. And there's no point in early days with a product like that to just put it out there and not learn. That's the whole point of putting it out there. And a learning framework is equally important. And that can be, instrumenting your metrics, your Google Analytics, to Mixpanel, to everything that you want there, and make sure you have all of that ready before you push it out the door. And that's probably will take longer for you to put together all of that than actually building what you're pushing out. And that's okay initially, because that's all the point of the initial versions is.
Well, and also, though, it wasn't just quantitative. I mean, you need the quantitative data. The thing that impressed me was the qualitative conversations that you had with our users. And it was, for me, so I tried, I would get on VChatter, and it was a clean version of chat roulette. And so if someone didn't want to talk to you, they would, swipe left or hit the button to go to the next person. I found it brutal because no one wanted to talk to a 38-year-old middle-aged guy. The rejection was just tremendous from the product. But Hitesh really got in there and would get people to talk to him. It was amazing.
So you actually use the product itself to talk to the users?
Yes, we did. And that was the beauty of that product, that I could just get on there, and I enjoyed chatting with people. And I was just maybe a little younger than you, Will. Not that much, but I don't know if that made the difference. But I just didn't give up. I just kept on trying, and there was what was happening was we saw there was a community forming. There were people who were coming from all over the world, and I think some of them I connected at a level, and it was a global product from day one. Just understanding why they were on that product was very important. All the way from, remember, there were communities forming around just self-help groups, like or survivors from different kinds of issues. Plus, there were things like, at that time, it was tough for people to figure out how to video chat. We forget 2008, 9, right? Around that time frame, there was no video chat on Facebook, and Facebook was the only way how a lot of these people were connected. So for some reason, we got traction in UAE and Philippines, and there was a huge Filipino community within UAE, and I saw how a lot of them were connecting over WeChat, and there were things like so we launched a feature which was to capture some of these moments as pictures from videos, stills. And we saw pictures like, people posting from hospital, my newborn, and my family back in Philippines can see this using WeChat. And so some of those things, like going at a deeper level is very important initially, right? It's not just the numbers, but the stories behind those numbers. What are they actually using it for? And understanding it at that deep level is how you then build what actually works for those users, right? Yeah.
What changes did that, like those conversations, like what development changes did those conversations cause? Like, were there certain features that were developed because of
Groups?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so certainly drives, the next set of tests that you come up with, both for the product and growth. So what you do is you look at what your users are doing, and it's not just what they are saying, but you actually see what they are doing, and then try to fix those parts of your product, because you end up building X, and your users are using 10% of that X. You can end up spending all your energy on that remaining 90% and forget about that 10% if you don't focus on what's actually happening. And it sounds very simple, but a number of founders end up focusing on the right, not the right thing, but things that users don't care about.
Yeah, the wish list that got developed in the isolation of the planning session, right? Versus the wish list of the fan base that you can then turn into fanatical fan base.
Well,
exactly.
I mean, I don't know if it's hard to get engineers to interact with customers a lot of times because of the skill set. But if you want to get your engineers to fix the actual problems, make them do customer service. And I think we did that for a little bit. Like, we would put people on customer service so that they would then know what actually 90% of the crap coming in that people didn't like was. So
yeah, we did do that, Will, because I remember being on customer service, and then we did that at Critical Watch too. Now we were really lucky. We had engineers that wanted to do it, so they were senior enough that they'd been through that process before, and they were itching to get in front of the customers.
One of the key benefits that bootstrappers have is they don't have as much money as as some of our funded friends have, and that's great. Like, in this context, if you think about it, if you have a lot of money, you'll hire a bunch of people, and you will get as detached from that actual experience as you can, because you have money and you have to spend it. While with for example, in that context with Will and I, like, we had no choice. Who was there to talk to these people? Like me and Will. Like, there was no one else.
And where it went wrong is we raised some money, which then made us hire a bunch of people, which then chewed up all of our time. I looking back on it, I feel like if you and I just stayed together in that room working on it, we would have actually probably figured it out and overcame the hurdles, in my opinion.
Yeah. In this case, certainly less is more.
In terms of coming up with a topic, the key is finding something you care about, the audience that you can take a journey with. And so for Eve and I, because we never raised money in the context of our startups, bootstrapping seemed like a natural fit. Plus, I sort of like that way of growing a business anyway. And so we narrowed our audience down, and then we went through this exercise with Laura Bush, who wrote Lean Branding. And that's really helped us. We haven't incorporated the feedback yet, but she's working on our visual assets, and I think that's really helped us. I mean, what did you get out of it?
We're still in that process. That was the best branding experience I've ever had, in that, walking through, getting really clear about, who our audience is and what it is we're here to do to help that audience, like to make their life better. The clarity that we gained from that exercise was amazing. And who do we talk to, are people that have been on the journey, especially if they're willing to share obstacles and overcoming them. It was important to us that we talk about the reality, and not just somebody made it to the summit and now they're going to look back and give the glossy version with the sparkles and stuff. And then to make sure that we hit the three legs of the stool: design, build, sell, so that if no matter what swim lane or swim lanes a founder is good at, they have the ability to access the other swim lanes, and then become more and more a full stack founder.
And then, we picked our medium, which we chose YouTube. But I mean, clearly, Eva's working on figuring out how to do blogging on Medium as a secondary distribution of content. We're starting at the base. I mean, when you put that channel up, you have exactly 0 subscribers, just like everybody else. And it's a noisy world out there. And so you have to really matter to people for them to subscribe and interact with your content. It's not just enough they subscribe. Do they watch the video? Do they ask questions back? Are they engaged? And everything I've read, so I started listening. There's one thing YouTubers love to talk about, and it's getting popular on YouTube. There's an obsession, about who got viral, who got followers, but it seems like you need about 100 videos in your catalog before you can expect people to start subscribing in large numbers beyond your initial social media. And so we're at 22, 23 pieces of content. And one thing I would say that really has made a difference the last 14 days is we've started marking up our videos for sub-content. So, you can put a marker in there and you can say, okay, well, this is a really good clip about the 3 things you need to know as a founder, or how to talk to your users. And then that becomes a 2 or 3 minute clip outside of the 30-minute clip. Because if we had to do 100 30-minute hour videos, that would take us probably a year to 2 years of work.
But also, I think it's meeting, trying to figure out for our audience, what are they most likely to consume? Like, it's a pretty significant commitment to listen or watch a video for 30 minutes or an hour. And fortunately, we've got some people that are digging it enough that they're doing that. But to have the shorter clips, our theory there is that, we can take some of the core nuggets and reach other founders that maybe don't have that much attention to give yet, or may never have that much attention to give.
I think those smaller clips, I think that's a great insight. So one of the things that I'm looking at now are, what separates, for example, virality on TikTok versus YouTube versus Instagram and these videos. And if you like think about how on TikTok, so you mentioned this limit of like this number 100, like on YouTube, you need a base. And there is this notion of like, the history and this reputation that you have, which will drive the exposure your new content will get. While on TikTok with For You kind of tab, it does not matter. Like it can be day 1 for me and I can explode in terms of virality. It doesn't matter. Like if I have 100 or 1 or 10 or 20, as long as I align with that, and they don't talk about that algorithm that drives that For You, But it's very similar to, Will, if you remember those days, which was trying to come up with who's the next person for you to talk to, and we will decide it. The algorithm will
Yes.
decide it instead of you following, like on Twitter. Like that's the same concept with that TikTok has. So it's interesting, like how these platforms differ in terms of how things go viral on them. And TikTok.
And I would say, it's interesting for the virality, yes, but then you need enough people to follow you and have enough content that you get enough views over time. So the breakout is very different on TikTok, but I'm going to, like, the people that I end up following, I go over and I look at their page and they've got 100 videos, 200 videos, because they're making these little 3-minute clips. I think the key there is probably combining it with the right music.
Yeah.
Because I will say TikTok is a hell of a lot of fun. Like, it gives me more joy than damn near anything else in my life right now during this pandemic. And it's their algorithm. Like, they pick really fun stuff to bubble up to you. It's amazing.
I agree. For some of these clips, one of the experiences I had recently is I started taking a lot of these courses because I'm sitting at home and I want to learn. And one of the courses I'm taking is by a guy named Ashwath Damodaran. He's a professor at NYU. He teaches valuation, like how do you value stocks and companies and assets. And so I started taking that class and with some of my friends, but we realized, the lecture was like 1.5 hours long.
Really?
Who has 1.5 hours? And then we saw he is shortening, like just those important points. He's putting that out for anything less than 20 minutes. Like most of them are 15 to 20 minutes. So what we do is we watch that together and then just go through his slides. Like that's covers that 1.5 hour content. And it's, I think, a similar concept as, from 40 minutes down to 5 minutes. But then there is some additional material that you can go through, which helps the audience understand what that bigger chunk of content actually conveys.
And it's not an either or. Like, there's a surprising number of people that watch the long video, but it's not everybody. Like, you just can't have all long content. I mean, I've been kind of paying attention to YouTubers and listening or reading the stuff that comes out in the media. There was a girl who noticed that English as a second language videos were like 20 or 30 minutes and pretty dull. And she just started doing 2 to 3 minute clips of it. I mean, like, she's now full time. That's all she does. She makes a living off of it. It's crazy.
Oh my God, I just had like 15 bajillion cats run through my head. So YouTube has built in some tiers that kind of help you. It gave us initial goals to reach. So one of them is when we can get our own vanity URL. What is that, like 100 subscribers? And then there's another.
Put us closer today. He joined the channel.
Hey, awesome. And then after that, there's the tier where you can actually begin to monetize. And so that's 1,000
subscribers, 4,000 hours of watching in a year.
And what we are noticing is that as our subscriber count grows, like our initial growth we got a nice burst because when we pushed out to our own personal social media networks, the people who we knew, who know us, who are interested in what we're doing, we get that initial hit. I think we've picked up a few people we don't know, and we don't have complete visibility in that. But what we have seen is that as the subscriber count has grown incrementally, the amount of time watched is growing faster. So we are getting more watch time growth from.
And the little clips allow you to dribble out one a day. And then we'll have a major release once or twice a week. We'll put out a longer form video. And everything I've read from listened to from all these YouTubers is it's the consistency of the release that builds up that long time audience. They all talk about it. Have to be consistent. They have to know something's coming on Friday. Or in our case, we'll do, every interview's ending up with 5 to 10 subclips. And so we're just kind of dribbling those out in between the major releases.
Well, for YouTube, what kind of tools are there out there, or how do you close the loop in terms of, you talked about, you getting questions from them or who your audience is. How do you go deeper into like what they are getting out of what you're creating? What sort of things exist, and what do you see missing in that?
So they do the typical demographics. The problem when you're starting out is that you don't have enough volume for a lot of those tools to be very useful. So more useful is people leaving comments on the video. I'm interested in this. I mean, we've got a guy that's building up an outdoorsman startup, and he left a lot of comments. And so you start to go, well, okay, this seems to matter. Now, watching how long people watch it, the thing that is valuable is you can look at where they drop off, how far they watched it, which videos they care about. I mean, we've done some content and boy, nobody cares. Other content actually seems to really resonate. I mean, people are pulling stuff out of it.
Yeah, and it's surprising what resonates at times. Like the Figma video, like we put that out there, and I was embarrassed, but I'm like, I'm committed. Part of our purpose is to, whether we look good or not, we're in the learning process. We're going to be transparent about learning because that's what bootstrapping is. And so I was a little bit embarrassed about this Figma video, and because the original in my head was awesome, right? And then what we put out was what it was. But the first comment on it was, man, if I'd known this, I would have saved $100,000. And I'm like, oh, well, we're definitely being surprised about the content. And to your point, Will, the analytics, as far as the demographic breakdown, it's not accurate right now at all. Because I'm really clear on friends who are telling me, hey, I really like this specific piece. So she'll tell me that, but Google says we have a 100% male audience, which is not accurate. This is where I think having the same core information. So we'll do an interview, we'll cover a subject. There'll be pieces in there that are really valuable. And if we look at it and ask, how many informational assets can we pull out of this and get out into the world, so we give the audience more interface points, then we can begin to see through different analytics, which ones are being read, watched, shared, commented on, clapped, like whatever it is. And we can begin to learn, like, for our audience, what do they care more about? And then make sure that
when we push it to our social media, which people, respond to it or comment on it or like it. And it varies. It's not the same for each clip at all. And
the account might be the same, but the actual people will be completely different, which is really interesting.
It's that consistency. It's putting out enough content. I mean, we're at 22, 23 pieces of content. Now we've got a backlog that we're pushing out. But I feel like you have to have enough worked out. I'm sure it's the same with the blog, right? How many articles do you need to have written before you have a good read? I think that's the hardest part of doing media play or content play, is you can't just create 100 videos in a day. They wouldn't be any good if you did.
Mm-hmm.
It takes time.
One of the things I've seen, and it could be writing on Medium or videos on YouTube, you start with something and then you slowly find your voice. Like, it's like you gravitate towards something that resonates with who you are and who you are trying to reach. There is that intersection. So have you seen that kind of shift happening? Which is, we started with this, but now we see this actually. Eva, you mentioned about the Figma video. So this is actually what people are responding to.
I think it's the authentic conversations with people like you. I mean, what do you think, Eva?
Yeah, I think we're still learning, like, overall our voice, but the consistent feedback that we've gotten has been that it feels real, it feels relatable, and it feels aspirational and in reach, which is different from people who interview superstars, and it may be really powerful aspirationally, but not necessarily. It doesn't feel within reach.
When you look at our first videos, we're just kind of doing standard coverage, and now you can kind of see a consistency of it. And we're doing that because that's what works on YouTube. If you listen to other YouTubers, they talk about they spend as much time on that cover, making it interesting looking so that someone will click on it, as they do on the video itself. So you have to kind of immerse yourself in the medium and learn, what are the signals that work. That wouldn't work on Twitter, but it works on YouTube. And it wouldn't work on TikTok, right?
I saw some of your videos, and one that resonated the most with me was actually with this kid. I think his name is Emmanuel, or
Yes.
yeah. And I showed that to my daughter too. And you're right. I mean, that kid is relatable. A girl who's 15 years old, she can relate to him and see the way, the level at which he's thinking, and how she can actually aspire to do similar things. That's I think you are making that impact in those
So
lives by not like putting those TikTok celebrities right now, but there are this second side of these teen celebrities who not many people talk about, and I think my daughter and all of our kids, they need to see that more. So please do more of that.
funny you bring that up, because Eve and I were having a conversation that we need to get your daughter as our second young bootstrapper one here.
Okay.
So tell us a
Ah,
little bit about what her startup is and what she's working on.
Yeah, so she stumbled upon this idea, which is from her own need, which is around micro internships for high schoolers. It's an issue right now where, high schoolers want to go and experience like little tiny pieces of work that they can do, not like, consistent like this role that you're given, but help these companies and also learn on the way where their passion lies. And it's very important to give those kind of touch points and experiences to these teenagers. So she's trying to build that. She found nothing that connects the two sides, and if you look at it as a marketplace, so she's trying to build that, which is who hires these high schoolers and what do high schoolers want to do in these micro internships. So that's what she's trying to build.
that's cool.
Now, how did you encourage her to start building things, or is it just did she spontaneously do this, or how did you develop her interest in this?
One, she saw people like you and me, and that was part of I think one big advantage of being immersed in this Bay Area sort of ecosystem is she gets exposed to a lot of great people already. I just encouraged her, right from the beginning to think in some kind of framework. It's like, what are the problems? Who is it for? And how can you solve it? And there are hundreds of these instances every day. If you point out to them, then they create a framework, and from small problems, those get bigger problems. And bootstrapping or entrepreneurship is all about figuring out who are you passionate about, what problem do you want to solve for them, and how do you want to solve it for them, right? So that's pretty much what you're doing. So that's something that was a framework I tried to inculcate in her, and I think that's something that helped. But I mean, it has to come from within, and failing enough. I think Emmanuel was talking about it, which is you need to just be not worried about failing, because it's every failure is a learning, and you keep building on top of those.
What's it like as a dad to see your daughter go through these beginning steps?
Yeah, it's certainly different. And so I mentor other entrepreneurs, founders, kids. It's very different. It's different in the sense that one, they don't listen to you, right? So that's why I really want her to talk to both of you also. A lot of times, whatever I tell her, maybe 2 months later, she'll come and say, "This guy is telling me the same thing. Maybe you're right." There's that validation point. So
Yeah.
with your own kids, it's different in that sense, because my dad, whatever, right?
Right.
But if someone else tells them, then that has more weight. But it's actually really nice to just see somebody, especially during the last few months where there is no school, there's no commute to school. I'm not traveling. We are all just locked in these walls. Like now, it's really satisfying to spend time with her and show her what I do, because now she watches me like from morning till night, like how my Google Calendar is, and she has a lot more visibility into what I do, and I have lot more visibility into what she does. We are trying to influence each other and teach. So I learn from her as much as I teach her. So yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting during the pandemic. Before Ian went to college, I was doing some of this consulting work with you guys, and him realizing that I could sit here and stare at the screen and type and make that much an hour, he was just like, what? You get paid to do what? I mean, it just, that light bulb goes off, and all of a sudden programming's a little more interesting. He starts thinking through it. It helps. I mean, we grew up watching our parents work, and it really helps to have that visibility because it makes you understand what it's all about.
You said that part of this has been you learning from her as much as she learning from you. Any favorite learnings for you so far?
So we say that we like to fail a lot, but I think kids, she taught me particularly like how quickly she was ready to put, one thing behind her and move on to the next one. I tend to, stick to things a lot longer than I should. And it's just important to have very fast cycles. And I think one thing I'm trying to do more of is that and learn from her. Other than that, yeah, I mean, teens these days, they are very opinionated. She comes with, so every day in the evening, there's always a debate that we have. And she tries to influence like on every single topic from everything that's happening around us, equality to, how from politics. And it's hard to avoid, the context that we live in. But it's good to see those opinions forming earlier than, used to. And I think I started worrying about those things much later in life.
It's funny. Is she a TikTok? Does she watch TikTok? Does she use the app?
She does, yeah.
It's very subversive, in my opinion, and I like it. I mean, but as I watch it, I'm like, there's some politics going on. They're talking to each other through these videos and communicating, and it's very interesting phenomenon in my opinion.
Particularly, like I could never imagine like the thing she's most passionate about in terms of music these days is BTS from Korea. I couldn't like imagine where and how, but it's a huge thing, and they are actually closing the loop. Like I saw like she is part of their army, as they call it, right? And she helps recruit more, and it's just amazing how that's happening, and that's those are the kind of things that I'm trying to see, because I'm actually part of some of these tools, but my algorithm, my For You is very different than her For You, and
yes,
a lot to learn.
Absolutely. Well, my wife will share it and look at it. Sometimes I have to be careful I don't tune the algorithm into too many 18-year-old girls dancing. I have to like other things so that my feed stays a little more varied, and interesting.
Now, keeping you honest.
Absolutely. So on the back end, I mean, we film this stuff. It's a little harder right now with the pandemic in that we have to pick a tool like Zoom to get everyone on it, and we're very, very captive to the internet. So we've done some interviews where the internet's really bad, and I have to edit the mess out of it. And then you have to pick a program. And
hang on, well, we had a learning curve with Zoom too, where there's all these different kinds of settings where you can film. If somebody's screen sharing, it can be filmed separate from the speaker, separate from. So now we do it. We do a recording where there's always the grid. There's always the person who's talking, and there's always the screen share if it's there. And we also do we have the setting where it pulls out the audio as a separate file as well, just to give us more flexibility in the post production. Is that what it's called?
Oh yeah, post production. Mm-hmm. We started with Camtasia. It's good and dirty. It doesn't cost much. It's $80. Really is made to do tutorials. I mean, that's why it was built, and its roots are capture yourself doing something on the computer, and then put a video together. And I did the Udemy course with that, but it doesn't really help you with the audio. And one of the things all the YouTubers talk about is audio matters more than video quality.
And if you go to our first video compared to the one that we just released, you're going to see like a big improvement in audio quality.
And so that made me switch from Camtasia to the Adobe product suite, because they really have the tools to do the post-processing of the audio. I'll let Eva describe what's the first step. We pull in the audio and
we basically separate them out. We get one clean audio. Then we export that to Audition, and we remove the white noise. So sometimes in the background, if everybody's quiet, you may hear like the clicking, or my AC will come on and there's this like, what is that? So you can zoom in and in the white spaces, circle those areas and say scrub, and it will take out the mouse clicking, or it'll take out the AC like for the entire audio track. So that's step one.
And then you do that in Camtasia, or do you use something else?
We switched over to the Adobe Creative Cloud, and we have Premiere Pro and Audition are the two primary tools for these pieces. And then we split. So one of us will go through and listen to the audio track, and then when you're talking or Will's talking or I'm talking, those get brought down to its separate. We put on a multi-track, and then each voice gets its own track, so that like the fidelity can be tuned. Like a female voice has different like audio treatments than a male voice. Will's office is going to have different reverb than my office, than your office. And so when they're on their separate tracks, then they can have their own audio conditioning.
Yeah, I'll de-reverb it. I'll adjust the EQ depending on whether it's a male or female voice. So there's just a workflow there. It seems very confusing in the beginning. Like you're like, oh my God, there's like 500 things you can do here. But there's probably 8 things you need to do every time. And now that we've gotten it down, the cycling's starting to happen pretty fast.
And then we also, at that time, when we learned this one, going through that first process is a great time to go ahead and put in markers to say, hey, this is a 3-minute section on this topic, or this is a 5-minute section on this topic. And that gives us 2 benefits in the future. One is it gives us already highlighted, these are going to be great short clips. And the second is that in the YouTube description, if you put time navigation, it helps YouTube index the concepts and ideas in it. And YouTube also puts in breakpoints. So if somebody is searching for that, they'll go to the exact part of the video with that idea.
And we used to wait and do that at the end, but like there's only so many times you want to listen to this video. Like you've already listened to it 5-10 times doing all this stuff. So you're better off just marking it out while you're doing the audio work.
And it's easier instead of Audition to know exactly it's here, and YouTube to go back and forth a second is painful.
So one thing I've realized is that this 45-minute kind of content, I'm consuming more as audio only. Like most of the time, either I'm on my bike or running, and that's like, I don't care too much about video at that time.
Yes.
So are you also thinking of like stripping out just the audio and maybe a podcast also? And does that help feed to your YouTube channel?
I think it will. I mean, we're going to conquer medium first. You can watch it on YouTube without watching it, because I'm like you, I'll walk and I don't care what they're doing. I'm just listening to what they're talking about. Yeah. But definitely, it would easily export to format for that. And also, it's funny, those markers, I was listening to someone who does podcasts, those markers will go into the audio of the podcast and mark it up as well. All this work, it's a little extra work, but then you end up with so much more content or better indexed content. And I think that's going to make a big difference over the long haul, because you're never going to go back and do it later, because you've got to make the next show. Like you're moving on to the next guest, you're moving on. So you have to do it in your workflow where it just doesn't get done.
Or it's too just painful.
We pull it back into Premiere Pro, and then I make a pass where I try to remove all the ums and you-knows and all that BS. And so you really try to trim it up and smooth it out. And then part of the problem is that the audio doesn't stay in sync with the video because of Zoom and the internet problem. So I'll have to watch the clips and nudge it around to line everything up so that it looks more natural. Get rid of the ums, and then I start exporting the little mini clips, and then I export the whole thing when I'm finished.
Other tools, and you may already know this one from the VChatter days, camera. So I have 3 potential cameras right now. I have my Logitech Brio, I have my main display, and I have my actual laptop. The Logitech does all of this phenomenal magic in the background. I'm going to show you my HD display camera is like right under it. And That's all of that work. So I don't have this huge lighting setup. That's this Logitech, and it's just
beautiful.
Boom. And then there's additional things you can do with it. Let me pull this out.
And so that's a great. I think it was $200. It's a really good.
It was less.
Investment.
It was so worth it. It also allows you to do like more of a widescreen. You can really zoom in if you want to. Widescreen, and then even wider screen. So here's some of my office mess, right?
My wife's always obsessed with people looking at my books behind me. It really bothers her.
I really want to, like, after this, like, zoom in and see all the rentals.
I think you should change up the books, every time. Just like put in a sleeper book, an Easter egg.
And then getting a good microphone set up is important.
Man, your voice sounds really good when you bring it closer.
Well, I could do it like this, but it doesn't look as good.
So I'm still figuring out audio on my side. I have a good mic, but it's positioning of it. And anyway, so audio is definitely its own thing.
And then we're learning, like, if you look at the good YouTube videos, they'll put text that will come in at key times. And I think it's all about pulling the video so that there's something new and interesting to look at. So that's something we're starting to incorporate this week. So it's all about pulling your attention in to the video. And so we're starting to push ourselves to use all these great effects that are in the Adobe suite to make it more and more interesting as we do it.
And it's going to be fun. Like, there's so much stuff that we can do. We just don't know how to do yet. There's sounds that can be added. There's video clips that can be added. There's a lot of possibility that we haven't even begun to scratch yet.
Now, we're doing these little short videos on terms, and Eva found these really cool programs that'll, like, you can draw stuff out with the hand and it's automated, or you could Toonly. And what was the other one?
It's Doodly for the drawing, to see it being whiteboarded, and Toonly for the animation. We don't know if it's going to resonate with the audience yet or not. But again, just seeing the tools that are out there. These are the ideas we have that we think are going to be valuable, and then seeing what the reactions or response is. Have you watched any of those? Like the definitions, LTV, or like any of the little short ones?
Not yet. Yeah.
When you do, would you just kind of drop a note about like, yay, nay, really beginner, probably not for, I don't know, just your feedback would be great.
Absolutely. Yeah, all of those I plan to watch, create a playlist, and just go through them. For the tools which are, after the video is ready, and you mentioned about putting it on all different social channels that you have, or your personal, and also everywhere that you can make it visible. What kind of things do you do after it's ready, and that helps with getting the traction, the initial few views, and does it matter? Like, for example, on Facebook, if within certain time period, if somebody likes it, or there is enough engagement with that video, they rank it higher in the feed. Is there anything similar with YouTube where you get some boost because you did certain things?
Part of the problem with my social channels is I don't have a curated brand yet. I mean, lots of different people have followed me for lots of different reasons. So people aren't resonating as a whole with the content. I think it's going to take a year or more, or some amount of time, for an audience for what I'm doing now to develop around it. I'm getting good feedback, but nothing that gets that viral boost yet.
Yeah, same. And I think that LinkedIn is probably a stronger connection in some sense, just because, at least for me, because my social network there is predominantly business, predominantly developed while I was in my own bootstrapping. That's good. My followers or my friends on Facebook is a really, really broad spectrum of why the relationship is there.
But half our views come from Facebook and half from LinkedIn and very little from Twitter.
Yeah, the Twitter formula I haven't gotten my head wrapped around yet. There's some things that we're doing on YouTube that are more for kind of it's long term, like we're planting seeds. So we're putting in place the right tags. We're making sure to tag it consistently. We're putting together playlists so that when people do find it, they can sort to the area that they want. when you put together the title is just as important as the cover. And then the first paragraph, in order for YouTube to deliver back results, if somebody's organically searching, that first paragraph needs to be in strong correlation to the title. So you want to reuse some of the same words. What else are we doing?
Yeah, it's funny. We focus so hard on YouTube, and we're using our other social media channels as just a way to get it out there. I think Medium, Eva's been investigating the SEO around publishing the blogs as a kind of leader into it. And you got to be careful because you don't want Google to think that you're putting the same content out more than once.
Or even worse, that your blog is plagiarizing the Medium content if it's still you. So what I learned there so far is really important to have your own blog. And then you can publish the same material on your blog in Medium. Really important to use Medium's import tool, because their import tool puts in place a tag in the background that says that the canonical copy, the one true word of God, came from your website. And so Google now knows that the website is the original source. And what you're doing is really trying to jockey around getting the exposure, and also hopefully over time the exposure getting more and more center of gravity towards the blog, but knowing that you're going to be leveraging Medium's publishing platform really heavily in the beginning. Go ahead.
Is Medium feeding into YouTube? And do you have, like, here is this video about LTV, and then there is an article about LTV, and that'll feed to
So
YouTube?
The strategy, and so you can watch this unfold, but the strategy is we do an interview, and inside the interview is some really good just content, really valuable jewel. Pull out that piece and to write a long form article about it that then references the video as the original source of. So the article will basically say, this is a subset of this interview. If you want to see the whole interview, go back to YouTube. And so Medium and the blog will have the same information pointers. LinkedIn, you have to do a little bit differently. You need to actually type it in the LinkedIn blogging tool. It needs to be a different article, so it can be a subset or a slightly different version, but it shouldn't be the same, or you'll get penalized. And what you can do there is make an excerpt and say, this is at the bottom, say this article is an excerpt of the larger article, and also of this video here. But LinkedIn wants their own unique material.
Yeah, one thing I love about your videos, particularly, and the way you started it, and I've seen Will, experiment with Medium and a few other channels also. This time there are two of you, like and you.
That is,
and I think
I think
the yin and the yang or something, which is very interesting to just see the two of you actually do this together and come up with these speakers and ideas and how much of will it's helping you to have another pair of eyes and Ava, you to do it together versus if you do this individually.
I don't think I could maintain the momentum without accountable, and I didn't think the world needed another successful white guy blathering video. I want more perspective around it. So, and it's just a hell of a lot more fun too.
Yeah, I have had in the back of my mind doing a YouTube channel for a long time, and it wasn't until we're doing one together that actually it got out of the gate. And I know that I wouldn't have had the momentum without it being the two of us. Plus, it's fun, and it's fun to work with Will. It's fun when we tickle each other and we both start laughing. It's fun to be on an interview and to have just the different perspectives and ways of looking at something, because I'll be listening, and then we'll ask a question. I'm like, I didn't even think to look at it from that angle. And so it's fun. It's full of learning, both on screen and off screen.
Well,
beautiful.
Thanks for taking your time to share with our listeners. And, bootstrappers, put your questions down in the comments. We want to hear from you. This channel's for you. And I hope to see Hitesh's daughter on here pretty soon. We're gonna try to talk her into doing this.
Oh, that'd be fabulous.
Absolutely. And yeah, she's amazing. I'm sure her views will be 100x, whatever you will get for
Probably
this video.
so. Yes.
So that's probably true. Oh, all right.
Thanks a lot,
All right.
guys.
See you.
Have a
Please
good
like or
one.
comment.
Thank you so much. It was a lot of
Thanks,
fun.
Hitesh.